There was a copperhead in my cousin's woodpile in Holmes County, Ohio, coiled up so still that her boy stepped within a foot of it before anyone saw the diamond pattern in the shadows. That was the summer I was 11. Nobody screamed. My uncle just walked over with a hoe, moved it off into the hedgerow, and said the same thing he always said. The grass got away from us this year. I didn't understand what he meant until decades later. The length of your lawn is not a chore. It is a decision about who feels safe living in it. Here is the number I want you to sit with before I explain it. 41 feet. Hold on to that. I will tell you exactly what it means before this video is over, but not yet. Stay with me to the end, because I'm going to give you the exact mowing rhythm we used on 3 different properties over almost 20 years. A rhythm that has nothing to do with how your lawn looks and everything to do with what it is hiding. I have never seen this written down in any extension pamphlet or garden magazine, and I have looked. Tell me in the comments how tall the grass is right now at the edge of your property. The part nobody mows because it backs up to a fence or a ditch or the woods. Just the height. I read every single one and I promise you, the answer tells me more about your snake population than any photo of the snake itself ever could. You already know the feeling. You walk out to get the mail in July and there's that flicker of motion in the grass by the foundation. And you tell yourself it was nothing, a lizard, the wind. And you go back inside and you don't mention it to anyone because saying it out loud makes it real. Same overgrown edge, same flicker, same half-second of held breath every single time you walk past that one patch of yard. And somehow, after years of this, you still haven't asked yourself the one question that actually matters. Not, how do I kill the snake? But why does that exact strip of grass keep producing one? There is no money in answering that question for you. There is a great deal of money in selling you a spray, a granule, a service contract that shows up every few weeks in a truck with a hose. Nobody can sell you a monthly bill for short grass. A lawn company can sell you snake repellent 42 times a year if you let them. They cannot sell you the simple fact that a snake will not cross open ground a hawk can see it on. That fact is free, and free things do not get marketing budgets. Now, I want to be honest with you about something, because I am not a wildlife biologist, and I never claim to be one. What I know because I lived inside a system where mowing was not a Saturday hobby. It was maintenance, the same as keeping a roof tight or a well clean. We did not call it pest control. It was just how the ground was kept. In that world, there was no such thing as a lawn for looks. Every cut strip of grass had a job: keeping ticks down near the path to the outhouse, keeping the orchard floor clear so fallen fruit didn't rot into mush that drew yellow jackets, keeping the lane to the barn open enough that you could see a loose dog or a spooked horse coming before it was on top of you. Snakes were simply one more thing that open ground discouraged, the same way it discouraged half a dozen other problems nobody had a single name for. We didn't call it a method, it was just how it was done. There was a woman 2 farms over from ours named Verna, in her 70s when I was a girl, who had what everyone quietly called the cleanest tree line in the township. Verna's husband had died young, and she ran that place alone for better than 30 years. I drove past that property again 2 summers ago, just to look, and the tree line was still cut close, still open at the base, still nothing for anything to hide in between the trunks and the lawn. I stood at the fence line counting snake sign, shed skins, the kind of disturbed leaf litter that tells you something's been moving through, and I stopped counting after 0. Not one. In 30 years on a farm surrounded by creek bottom and hayfield, the one strip of ground kept open and mowed tight was the one strip that never produced a den. Here is what is actually happening. And it has nothing to do with scent or chemicals or moon cycles, despite what half the internet will tell you. Snakes are ambush predators and prey animals at the same time. They need cover to hunt from and cover to hide in, and tall grass gives them both at once. It hides the mouse they're hunting, and it hides them from the hawk that's hunting them. Cut that grass down to 2 or 3 inches, and you have removed both halves of that equation in one motion. The mouse has nowhere to run a trail through, and the snake has nowhere to disappear into if a red-tailed hawk drops out of the sky. Chemists and wildlife folks have a term for this: habitat exclusion. But uncomfortable is the right word. You are making your yard an uncomfortable place to be exposed in. And exposed is the one thing a snake cannot tolerate for long. This is what the record shows, if you go looking for it, instead of just spraying and hoping. University extension data on copperhead and rattlesnake encounters near homes consistently points to the same pattern. Encounters cluster where mowed lawn meets unmowed edge, brush pile, or stacked wood, not in the middle of open, short grass. The edge is the danger zone. The open middle is the safe zone. We just never had a name for it growing up. We called the edge the wild line, and the rule was simple. Keep the wild line as far from the house as the property allowed, and keep everything inside that line cut hard. Now let me give you the actual practice, because knowing why does nothing for you if you don't know how. The first thing is frequency, not just height. We mowed close to the house and outbuildings every 5 to 6 days during the growing season, never letting it climb past 3 inches before cutting it back to 2. That is tighter than most lawn services will ever schedule you, because tight mowing on a 5-day cycle costs more labour. And labour is exactly what a flat monthly fee is designed to avoid spending. You do not need a service for this. You need a mower and a calendar. The second thing is the transition zone, the 6 to 8 feet right where your mowed lawn meets the woods, the fence line, the ditch, or any brush. This is the strip most people ignore, because it is not the lawn, it is the in-between. And in between, things get neglected. We treated that strip as more important than the open lawn itself. It got mowed just as tight, sometimes tighter, because that is the exact zone where a hawk loses its sightline and a snake gains its confidence. Think about it from the snake side of things for a moment, because that is the part almost nobody bothers to do. A snake moving from deep cover into open lawn is not making one decision. It is making a string of small decisions, a few feet at a time, testing whether the next patch of ground still hides it. If the transition zone itself is already cut tight, that string of decisions ends before it ever really starts. The snake simply never crosses into committed territory because the cover ran out at the edge instead of 15 feet into what you thought was your safe lawn. Move the short grass closer to the wild line and you move the entire decision point further from your house without doing one bit of extra work past that strip. The third thing is what you do with what you cut and what falls naturally. Grass clippings left in thick mats, fallen branches left where they drop, a stack of firewood pushed up against the house. These recreate the exact cover you just mowed away, except now it is concentrated right at your foundation instead of spread across an acre. We always pulled woodpiles a minimum of 30 feet from any door, raised off the ground on rails, so there was open air and light underneath, because a snake will use a woodpile as a den the way you would use a basement. The fourth thing, and this is the one almost nobody mentions, is what is happening below the grass, not above it. Voles and mice tunnel through thatch, that thick, dead layer of old grass that builds up if you mow too high for too long, never bagging clippings, letting it compress into something like a mat. That thatch is a highway system for rodents, and rodents are the entire reason a snake comes anywhere near your house in the first place. Cut low enough, often enough, and you starve that highway before it ever forms. And here is where it gets interesting. The anti-pattern. The mistakes I made myself before I understood any of this. I want to walk through these honestly, because I did every single one of them. I let the back fence line grow tall for 2 full seasons because I liked the look of it, the soft, wild edge against the field. And it took me until late summer to realize I had built a perfect ambush corridor running the entire length of my own property. I stacked cut brush at the corner of the garden instead of hauling it off, telling myself I would deal with it later. And later turned into an entire summer. And that brush pile became exactly the kind of cover I had just spent weeks removing everywhere else. I mowed on a schedule that suited my own time instead of the grass's growth rate, letting it climb to 5 or 6 inches before cutting because that was convenient for me. Which meant for several days out of every week, the lawn was tall enough to undo all the previous mowing. And I ignored the thatch entirely for years, mulching every clipping back into the lawn because it seemed efficient, not realizing I was building a rodent highway 1 mow at a time. I did all 4 of these myself before I understood what was actually wrong, and I share them now so you do not have to lose a summer figuring it out the hard way. If you are the kind of person who would rather understand the actual mechanism behind a problem than just throw money at the nearest service truck, you already know what to do. Come back, because what I'm building toward next is the exact seasonal calendar we used on 3 different properties, and that is an open loop I am not closing today. Now I want to be honest with you about who this is not for, because nobody selling you something tells you this part, and I am not selling you anything. This is for anyone with a yard that borders woods, field, ditch, brush, or a creek line. Anywhere snakes already have habitat nearby, and your lawn is the buffer between that habitat and your door. It is not for someone in a dense urban block with no green space within a mile, because there is no population there to manage in the first place, and mowing tight will do nothing but waste your Saturday. It is also not a substitute for basic exclusion, sealing foundation gaps, screening vents, keeping doors flush, because grass management handles the yard, not the house itself. Anyone who tells you mowing alone will seal your home against snakes is selling you something incomplete, whether they know it or not. Here is the larger principle underneath all of it, because the specific method is really just one example of something bigger. There is good money in selling a homeowner a problem that returns every few weeks, forever. There is no money at all in telling that same homeowner that the problem was never really about the snake. It was about the grass. And the grass is something they already own a tool to manage. Every system that asks you to keep paying depends on you never learning the one free thing that would let you stop. The whole industry of recurring outdoor pest service runs on exactly that gap between what is free and what is convenient to sell. This weekend, walk your own property line and measure, by eye or by foot, exactly how far your tallest, wildest grass sits from your back door. Come back and tell me that distance. I am genuinely curious how close most of you are living to your own wild line without realizing it. Type the word edge in the comments if you have ever found a shed snakeskin somewhere on your property and never told anyone. Because in my experience, almost everyone has, and almost nobody admits it until someone else says it first. Now, the number, 41 feet. That was the distance from Verna's back porch to the start of her tree line, measured the day I stood there counting and stopped at 0. Not by accident, not by luck. 41 feet of tight, frequently cut grass between a woman living alone and a creek-bottom property that should have been crawling with snake activity by every rule of habitat I just walked you through. She never called it a method. She called it keeping the place decent. I call it the clearest proof I have ever stood in front of with my own eyes. And the artifact I promised you at the start, the seasonal rhythm itself, written the way we actually used it, not the way a magazine would print it, begins in early spring, the moment the ground firms up enough to walk without sinking, and it never lets the grass cross 3 inches before the blade comes back through, all the way until the first hard frost locks the growth down for the year. That is the whole rhythm. 5 to 6 days, never longer. No exceptions for rain or for being tired, because the snake does not care how tired you are. Waste nothing, not even the part of your yard you think nobody's looking at. And remember, the people who built this country with their hands already knew that the safest ground is the ground you can see all the way across.